Hello everyone, my name is Jason and I am an ISFP. You are watching my ISFP journey, my ISFP journey. That's a mouthful. Anyway, thank you for watching. I do hope that you will subscribe and follow along with me on these videos. And I do appreciate your interactions via the comments. So today I want to talk about the cognitive functions. What are the cognitive functions? The cognitive functions are, I really would classify them as brain functions, honestly. So let me try to dive into this a bit. We as human beings, all of us, we perceive things. We all perceive. We perceive the world. We perceive the things in the world. We perceive ourselves. We perceive other people. We perceive the past, the present, the future. We perceive ideas. And we judge. We make judgments about the things that we perceive. We judge whether things are good or bad. We judge whether or not things are right or wrong, whether they are true or false, whether they are valuable or worthless, or somewhere in between. We all perceive and we all judge. And I don't mean to suggest that we always perceive and then judge, perceive and then judge. It doesn't really work that way. We as people are constantly perceiving and judging. Sometimes we perceive things and then judge them. Sometimes we judge things before we perceive them. Sometimes we judge things we may never fully perceive. But we are always perceiving things and judging things. And to be judging, again, just means to decide. Do we think that these things are whatever the thing is? Do we believe that it is good or bad, right or wrong, true or false, valuable, worthless? That's all it means to judge. I know this is a bit of an aside, but let me say this. I know that in our time in history and in our culture, the concept of judging often has with it a rather negative connotation. And I think that really applies primarily to people sitting in judgment over other people. Sort of that, I'm better than you are, or you're bad because of this, that, or the other. If your mind immediately jumps to a negative thought process about the concept of judging or making judgments, you really, in order to understand type psychology and cognitive functions, you really need to kind of get that mindset out of the way. Because judging in this idea, in this sense, is not bad. It's not negative. You do it all the time. In fact, if you have come to the conclusion that judging is bad, well, you've made a judgment. You have judged that judging is bad. So again, I know that probably really, that negative stigma applies more to sitting in judgment over people, but I just wanted to make that comment for anyone who might hear the word judging and sort of bristle at it, okay? So we as human beings perceive and we judge, all right? We take things in, we perceive things, again, the world, things in the world, ourselves, other people, past, present, future, and we make decisions about these things that we have perceived. So the cognitive functions are all about how we as human beings perceive and how we as human beings judge. Now, there are four ways that people perceive, and there are four ways that people judge. And all people will be perceiving or judging in some combination of these same ways. And they are, on the perceiving side, extroverted sensing and introverted sensing, extroverted intuition and introverted intuition. And on the judging side, we judge according to four functions: extroverted feeling or introverted feeling, extroverted thinking or introverted thinking. Now, what I'm about to say is where we begin to get into a little bit of disagreement among people who do subscribe to type psychology. There are some who would say that all human beings, regardless of what type you are, regardless of what your personality type is, that all human beings have all 8 functions, all 4 perceiving functions and all 4 judging functions. Some people would say, no, we each have 4. We have 2 perceiving functions and 2 judging functions. And others would say, well, we might have all 8, but it's really only the first 4 that matter. Okay? And by first 4, I mean your first 4, because it's different for everybody. And I'll explain that more in depth in future videos. I personally subscribe to the first idea, that we all have all 8 cognitive functions. We all have all 4 perceiving and all 4 judging functions. However, I would agree that for the most part, even if we do have all 8, it's really those first 4 that show up the most and sort of reveal themselves the most in our character, in our way of thinking, and in the way we sort of handle all things, in the way we perceive and in the way we judge. But I do believe that those other 4 are present in all of our minds and do play a significant role. So again, we have 4 perceiving functions, we have 4 judging functions, or let me say there are 4 perceiving functions, there are 4 judging functions, and we as human beings, each one of us, regardless of personality type, either have all 8 of them, or we only have 4, or we have all 8, but only 4 really matter. But I'm going to, as I go through my videos, I'm going to present things from the concept that we have all 8, because I really believe that we do. And over time, I'll explain why I have come to that conclusion. Okay. So even though we all have some combination of these perceiving and judging functions, the reason that there are different personality types, the reason that we are so different from one another depending on our personality type, is because those functions play different roles within our minds. So, for example, introverted feeling. Introverted feeling plays the primary role in my mind, the ISFP. I'm an ISFP. Now, some would call that the dominant role. Some would call that the dominant function. Some would call that the primary function. Some would call it the lead function. Some would call it the hero function. In most of my videos, I'm primarily going to be using the language hero function, and I'm going to explain that in future videos, okay? But for me, introverted feeling is my hero function, or my first function. But you could take someone who does not have introverted feeling as their primary function. Let's take my ESFP daughter, who has introverted feeling as her second function, or her parent function. Now, for her, she has introverted feeling that's playing a significant role in her mind, and I have introverted feeling playing a significant role in my mind, but they do come out differently because of what role that function plays in each of our brains. Now, these things are these functions are how our brain processes, perceives, makes judgments on information. Okay, it's sort of like the wiring inside of our brain. This is not to say that 2 people who have the same wiring don't behave quite differently due to environmental circumstances, their parents, the things that they've experienced in their life, the tragedies, the successes, the joys, and all of those things. We're all very different. 2 ISFP people can be very different. 2 INFJ people can be very different. But our brains are wired a certain way, and that wiring shows up in the order that the cognitive functions present themselves in the way that we perceive and judge information. So in my future videos, I'm going to be going into more depth on the perceiving functions, and then in another video on the judging functions. And then once I've gotten past explaining the perceiving functions and the judging functions, we'll really start taking a look at how this presents itself in the mind of the ISFP. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I do, again, hope that you will subscribe, and I also hope that you will have yourself a wonderful day. Bye now.